All right, what's up, guys? I think we got it. I think we got it this time. My technical literacy isn't fantastic, but we persevered. So thank you for thank you for sticking with it. So I'm going to try to stream on a weekly basis. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the feedback's like. I really want to be able to do these AMAs and get as many questions answered as possible while I take all this extra time to do a lot of the long form stuff that I've been doing. So that's what we're going to focus on. So as you guys pile up questions, I'm going to sift through. I'm going to pick the ones I think are the most relevant, maybe the ones I can answer the quickest. Um, Real quick, got to pay the mortgage. So, first of all, I got to give a shout out to Boostcamp. I'm really proud to be associated with their product. If you haven't checked it out, there's just a ton of programs from Greg Knuckles and Eric Helms and Cody Lefevre. Jeffrey Verity Schofield has some stuff up there now. So, they're expanding their reach, and it's more than just an app where you just plug in your numbers and that's it. It's a huge learning library. And they have some pretty interesting stuff coming down the pike. I don't think I'm really at liberty to say, but let's just say they're looking at making use of some really exciting new technology that just came on the scene recently to try and augment their product. So, really excited to be part of that. And also, if you guys haven't seen the Barbell Apparel collaboration, I'm really happy with the way these came out. They're kind of a throwback from the original Kong shirts I had at my gym. And I really like the design, really like the way it came out. So, also extremely excited to have Barbell Apparel on board. They've been really good to me. And of course, their jeans are extraordinarily comfortable. So, that's enough shilling for right now. Um, let's get to answering some questions. I had a couple real quick. I'm going to go through from Patreon. I have a couple old ones that I hadn't really had a chance to get to, and once I get through that, I'll get to your guys's. Let's see who we got in the chats today. See if I can multitask. Let's see if I can read and answer. All right, we got some good ones. Two focuses for mitigating chronic injury. That's a good one. I'll get to that one. How are my dogs? Spoiled. And actually, I don't know if you can see. That's that's how my dogs live. That's that's their life, right? What a time to be alive. Some program questions. Yeah, absolutely. We've got some good ones coming in, guys. So start out. I want to get to this Patreon question really quick. This came from Agamjio Singh, who's a regular poster on Patreon. Asks what the most important muscle groups for contact sport athletes like football, basketball, etc. It's a good general question. I get a lot of sports questions, and I wish I had a lot more um, depth to give. I mean, that probably requires a little more specific consideration with you, what position you play, what your experience is like, what specific issues you're having. Generally, we're talking about sports. We're talking about power sports. So whatever you do in the gym is really just focused on increasing force production. That's really it. You generally get stronger in the gym. You generally improve your ability to squat, deadlift, press, and so on. And the idea is that in the context of your sport specific application, whether it's soccer, football, track, whatever it is, that as you practice that extra force production is going to be kind of refined down. So that's the idea of periodization, very broad stuff early on, very specific stuff as you go further along. And you want to get those qualities to transfer over. So with athletics, when you're talking about which body parts, which movements, basically everything between the kneecap and the belly button. So you're looking at quads, hamstrings, glutes, hip flexors, abdominals. That's it. It's really hip extension. Knee extension is also important. As you get away from that, it's going to have a lot more to do with the sport that you're getting ready for. So anything hip dominant, anything hip extension is going to help with just about all sports. Contact sports, I mean, midsection is going to be huge because force transfer is a big thing. So the more you flex your abdominals, the more you squeeze and brace, and you can keep that torso rigid, the more efficiently you'll be able to transfer force, whether it's throwing a punch, whether it's tackling somebody, whether it's throwing a shot put, because everything comes from the ground through your knees, hips, ankles, gets expressed through your torso. So the more rigid that is, the better off you're going to be, right? It's like, would you rather get hit by a brick or a sponge, you know, or like a wet sponge? You don't want something that breaks. You don't want something that gives. If you have a 5 pound bag of sand or a 5 pound brick, the brick is going to mess you up a lot more because it's rigid. It transfers all that force. So you want to get as rigid as possible. So that's a big one. This first one was a really good one. Forehead ass. What's up, brother? What are your top two focuses for mitigating risk of chronic injury? I mean, my chronic issues, I can talk about those. It's a hard thing to answer generally because there's so many different reasons you guys are going to get hurt or deal with stuff as time goes on. My issues have usually been from being bound, overhead pressing, squatting, shoulders and my glutes got really, really tight. And I relied on that for a lot of compression as I would come down. And what happened was I was just trampolining on the joints without keeping my basic movement ability really good, without having any type of flexibility like whatsoever. And as time went on, I started to get these overuse issues and they turned into chronic issues. So like my shoulders are toast. Like they're held together right now, and I have to lift to keep them feeling good. But labrum tears, rotator cuff tears, all kinds of shit just from being reckless and not paying attention to movement stuff. So I think the big thing is maintaining balance. As I did more rotator cuff specific work, external rotations, unstable stuff with like banded or like bottom up kettlebell presses, things that are unstable. That helped a lot. And then rear delt stuff is really good. Upper back stuff is really good. And then making sure that I have some like basic amount of flexibility and then I'm not using the weight to like force me into this super tight compressed area. It's a great way to move weight kind of artificially. Some guys have used that, but I think that'll make you bounce. So my big thing is don't play into stuff that tends to mess you up. Don't ignore basic movement stuff. You want to have some amount of flexibility. You want to have some amount of movement ability and stay well rounded. And that's about it. And the rest, I mean, it's going to be so specific to what you do. So if you have something that's already lighting you up, I recommend people stop doing things that hurt. There's enough variety of stuff you can do. The worst thing to do is nothing. The second worst thing you can do is keep doing the thing that's been screwing up. We're talking about chronic issues. We're not talking about, oh, you got to tweak. We're not talking about, oh, this one-off pain set in. If you've been doing something that's been getting progressively worse, don't do that thing. I know some people find controversy in that, and I think that's stupid. Uh, as time goes on and you let that injury heal up, you do some other things, you find some ground. You can find like an entry point back in and start building back up and adapting to that and see how it goes. But that's a very trial and error, individualistic based approach. So I can't really give you a cut and dry thing. You got to see what works really hard. Let's go down the line. Predictions for World Strongest Man. I can't even tell you who's competing right now. The more I compete, the less I watch. So I'm kind of out of the loop as far as who the big names are right now. I know Mitch Hooper is running over everybody. Trey Mitchell's been doing well. That's about all I know. Can you do powerlifting with bodybuilding? Absolutely. You should. You should do that if you're focused on building muscle and strength, especially as an earlier athlete. Stop specializing. If you're new, if you're an intermediate, until you're at the point where you're really trying to take down big contests, big titles, stop specializing. Strength is strength, size is size. It takes a long time before you really get those things to diverge. It takes so long. You have to get pretty big. You have to get pretty strong before you're really justified in focusing just on that thing. Specificity is important as you get closer to a show, but in general, strength and size, it's very much the same thing for newer athletes. Man, you guys are coming in hot here. Strongman comp in June. Right knee's been aching from all my carry training. Any tips? Yeah, I've dealt with that quite a bit. I've had really bad patellar tendonitis that lingered trying to get ready. I remember Clash, the year I did Clash, the first year. My patellar tendonitis was insane. So first time I really leaned on ibuprofen for prep because I really try not to do that. Ibuprofen and Voltaren really held me on for those workouts where I had, because there was a squat for reps. The one time there's a squat for reps, my knees were just destroyed. And I'd look forward to that for years. And then doing yoke and farmers on top of it, just because heavy stuff is almost better because heavy stuff, you're controlled, you're even, you're moving steadily. When it's fast, you're trying to pound your feet just as fast as you can. And that takes a beating. I hate yoke races. I hate farmer races because they light my knees and hips up the absolute most. That's a hard one because you have to get some work in, but You're probably not going to be best off just sucking it up and going with contest weights with a bunch of anti-inflammatories. I would save until a couple weeks out the anti-inflammatories to really just get in what you can, but you want to really limit how much you use that stuff to keep yourself together. Um, June, I mean, you got a couple of months, 2 months. That's actually not that much time. I would just keep frequency down. That's it. Try to consolidate throughout the week. Anything that uses your knee, squatting, carries, try to do them on the same day. Try to keep it to once a week. The rest of the time, focus on rehabbing those joints. Limit what you do in the form of I'm trying to think, like jumping stuff, squatting stuff, um, anything that involves pounding your feet. That's really it. It's just managing the split, I think, is the most important thing. And then secondarily is managing load within that split. So you kind of walk that tightrope of, does this hurt too much? Is this going to keep me at a commission for too long? It's a really hard thing to do. Um, Going to work in a village in Africa for 3 months. Man, Godspeed. Won't have access to a gym. Any tips for not losing too much strength and size? Not really. I mean, if all of your size and strength is based on lifting in the gym, I mean, maintenance is easy, but if you don't do any barbell stuff for 3 months, like even if you were doing rigorous calisthenic stuff every day, you're going to lose some size and strength. Just be active. I mean, the difference between doing nothing and then being active somewhat on a regular basis, that's going to be as much as you can hope for. And don't overthink it. Just get some daily push-ups, lunges, sit-ups, just whatever you can get in. Uh, do I still play Yu-Gi-Oh? That was a bit. I've never played Yu-Gi-Oh. No, I had my own nerdish tendencies, but they were never really directed towards anime or I don't even know if Yu-Gi-Oh is anime. It's like Americanized anime. I never got into the card games. Uh, Brian Alsru's programming style. All I know about it is the giant sets. I've watched a few videos of his. I know he's a very athletic dude, and it looks like he keeps that in. You get strong guys in the context of what you've done early on. So if you've always been active, if you've always played a sport, and then you throw barbell training on top of that, you do it for a long time, you're going to be very strong in the context of those skills and those capacities. So if you are always doing GPP work, or if you're a runner and you're always running, or if you're always doing giant sets or borderline cardio stuff, you can get strong in the context of doing that. If you couldn't, you wouldn't have NFL players or rugby players that are stupid strong while also being in amazing condition. You just have to make it a priority. If you've been training for a very long time for specifically for strength at the expense of everything else, and you try to transition over, there's going to be some growing pains, but I would argue that it's worth it. So that's really all I know about Brian Alsru. He found it to be a lot of work, but things sticking through it would be better in the long run. Yeah, I think generally. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do it that way. I got in the habit of doing supersets with my main stuff. Token volume stuff, there's no reason you can't go do a set of pull-ups or a set of sit-ups in between. So, especially on all the warm-up sets, it's so easy to sneak in volume for other things. And if it can keep your heart rate up just a little bit, it's like, why wouldn't you do that? Being strong is really cool, guys. Like, being strong is great. It's fantastic. But it sucks if you're not useful. It's a thing that, like, so many people don't understand. It really sucks if you're not useful. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. Hold on, man. It's freezing here. Just one second. Sorry, I keep it like 55 degrees in here. So I need a blanket, like a geriatric. This is my Nicolas Cage blanket that my wife got me for my birthday. I think it's pretty fantastic. Also keeps me warm. Yeah, here's the thing that a lot of people don't know is that when it comes to doing really shitty endurance stuff, if there's ever a point where you have to be in shape, imagine that the end of the world comes, we get invaded, and you have to like grab your family and just go ruck out into the woods for survival. In whatever scenario you can come up with where you would have to have endurance, your life depends on it, being strong and out of shape is almost worse than just being out of shape. Because when you're strong and out of shape, basically you've conditioned your body to take the governor off just completely. That's what training is. All those neurological inhibitions, you've convinced your body like, hey, we don't need those on. We can handle all this work. But if you're in shitty cardiovascular shape or even like just muscular endurance, you're not conditioned to getting into those later efforts as the minute goes on, you can dig yourself into a fatigue hole that is, I mean, it can borderline be life threatening. And I knew two guys that got rhabdo, actually, that exact scenario. One of them, Abe Ramirez, rest in peace. He didn't die from that. He had a seizure later on. Real sad story. Abe was a good dude, regular at my gym, good power lifter. And but he was a guy that, he liked blasting and he liked lifting really heavy and didn't like doing much of anything else. Very talented, could have gone pretty far. He did this dumbass deadlift event that some guy held on, where it was like three guys showed up for it. They were all pretty well-known powerlifters in Southern California, and it was like there were two different ones they did. One was like deadlift 500 pounds for a set of 10, but it was like as many sets as you could going on for like an hour. Like whoever dropped out first or couldn't finish a set of 10 lost. Another one was like a round robin style where they did singles. Three guys pull 500, pull 500, pull 500, round robin nonstop. And they ended up getting into like 70 some reps with 500 pounds. The back pump he got was so extreme that I can't remember if he got compartment syndrome or not. I don't think he did. I think that was a risk, but he did get rhabdo. Him and one other guy was literally hospitalized for rhabdo. And the guy that didn't get rhabdo was the guy that dropped out earlier because he wasn't quite as strong as they were. So that's an example I always go to. It's similar with CrossFit. If you're really strong, you just go and try and fuck yourself up out of the gate. You can dig yourself into a hole. So, moral of the story, kids, being strong is cool, but you should strive to be strong in the context of not ending up in the hospital if you decide to push it a little too hard one day. And the thing is, that guy would have been so overwhelmingly, he would have been so much better off. He would have handled it so much easier by simply having something that is like endurance adjacent into his programming. He didn't even have to specialize. If he just had some type of regular endurance activity, that wouldn't have happened. So, anyways, that was my story for the day. My take on Squat University, a hack who pushes nonsense or a great source for hitting the stabilizers and tweaking form. I think he has a lot of really good stuff, but I think like so many people in their profession, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. He made a career in his profession. His lean is, I think, looking towards the small stuff that people miss. So when people have the mean millimeters of hip shift, there's a difference between trying to find what's plaguing an individual, like what is your issue that you're dealing with, versus what are recommendations we can give to everybody. Those are two entirely different things. So when he's making statements that everybody has to have this picture perfect form, I find that excessive. I don't agree. However, on the other hand, the kind of like, it just has to be good enough and, don't worry about it if there's some knee cave. Don't worry about it if your back rounds. It'll be fine. The body adapts. I think that gets kind of stupid too. There is kind of a sweet spot and there's a lot of play in the joints in there, but there is kind of a sweet spot where it's good enough that you're not really likely to mess yourself up. You can move pretty efficiently and you can let the programming do its job. Without having to spend all of this endless time like refining your stuff. But you can go too far on either route. I have looked at one of his books. What was his last one? Rebuilding Milo. It was really good. There was some great stuff in there that I used on myself that I couldn't find anywhere else. So if you're a person who's having a chronic issue, those resources are invaluable because it might be these things that you looked past that you weren't really aware of. It might be those things that are contributing, and it might not. It might be something else. It might be load management. It very well might be some people are intolerant to frequencies. Some people need more time to build a tolerance to the type of work they're doing. Some people got too strong too quick. There's a lot of reasons you'll have these issues, but you have to be able to trust that people can sift through all of them, implement some trial and error, and get to the root of it. You're not going to have the key to all of your problems in an Instagram meme. You're just not. So I don't fault him too much. I mean, I know he said some things in kind of an absolutist tone. He plays into it, but I think the culture at large has to be responsible for taking all of this and kind of assimilating it into a really useful way that gets a good result. Any thoughts on one arm barbell lifts? No. I have no thoughts about those. None. Pulling exercise with a bad bicep. Yeah, I lost my bicep a couple of years ago too. Depends how new it was. A year ago, and it hasn't recovered fully. I mean, I didn't get surgery on mine, but mine was recovered in a couple of weeks. I mean, I took BPC 157 for it. Um, the tendon regrew in like 3 weeks. I did a strongman contest 4 weeks after tearing it. Uh, Results may vary. I'm not telling you all to go load up on BPC, but I don't know. That's hard. That's super individual. As with all injuries, I do regular barbell stuff. I never switched. I never compensated. So do what you can. Find an entry point. Move forward. And I don't know what you mean by bad. If it hurts or if it's just weak. Because my bicep, I mean, I can do pretty well on stone loads and barbell rows and stuff, but I feel it on pull-ups. It's probably, when I do curls, like dumbbell curls, probably still about 15% weaker than the other side, and it probably always will be. So I would just use bilateral movements and just train it as normal. It's what I actually do. So, man, I gotta jump forward. I wish I could answer all of these, but man, Wolf Larson, thank you. Super chats. Forgot about the super chats. Classical periodization unnecessary for recreational lifters. Is DUP enough? Oh man, don't get me started on periodization. It's going to be like another Dave Tate talk where we talk so much about all of the theory and all of the potential applications without giving anything too actionable. It's my biggest regret about that interview when I look back at it is, and I love that type of conversation. I find it very stimulating, but I regret not giving anything more concrete or really tethering that stuff back down to earth. This is one of those questions it's really hard to nail down because there's so many different circumstances where it could go one or the other. For the most part, a full classical periodization, I think of a macro cycle, like starting before a contest, like 16 weeks, 20 weeks out, and then going through all the mesocycles or all the phases, all the way down to a contest taper to a max out. Yeah, most recreational lifters do not need to do that. The whole point of base strength when I wrote it, which I have to rewrite it because I don't think this point got expressed as well as it should be. The whole point of base strength was that periodization it's not required. It doesn't have to be so specific. If you want to go that route, it'll be very productive. I recommend long-term lifters do that. If you're a serious lifter, I recommend eventually you get comfortable with that form of training. But the average recreational lifter, you just need a minimum amount of variation. You do need some. So it helps. You can look at it through that context of volume over here, strength over here, less specific, more specific. It's a back and forth. So I took something relatively complex and just kind of broke it down to what I thought the minimum amount of complexity needed to get the desired result for a recreational lifter. And that's it. But even so, most of the progression somebody might run, most of the types of training somebody might run, you might be able to run it for a very, very long time without necessarily having to swap it. So I think that's important, knowing what to switch up when it does get stale. But guys, if you're doing it and it works, keep doing it. I get so many people that are like, man, I love this program, ran this program, it was great. I'm going to do this next program you put out next. And I always have to say, like, well, how are your results? And they're like, well, it was good. I'm 10% stronger. I added this much on all my lifts. It's like, do it again. Just do it again. You're a new lifter. You're not getting ready for a meet. You're just trying to build a foundation of strength. This thing worked. Do it again. It's going to be a while when you're new or even when you're intermediate, if something is paying off before you really have to switch. Now, if you're a contest focused athlete, different story. Eventually you do have to get into contest prep. And there's a lot of guys that have their just general training and then they have their taper. There's a lot of guys that train that way too. So many ways to skin a cat. And I wish I could give you the one size fits all. Do something like classical periodization if you really are OCD and you want a program that's laid out 3 months in advance and you want to know exactly what to do. If you have the temperament, the personality type to do that start to finish, and you're not going to get 3 weeks into the hypertrophy phase and say, this is fucking bullshit, and jump, do something else, then go that route. But most recreational lifters, I would recommend something simpler. I would recommend a simpler progression, something that does allow for more effort early on, something that does allow for more variety of thresholds to be trained more consistently. I am inclined to think that would be more beneficial to more lifters. Uh, what nerd stuff did I get into? Man, comic books was the big one. I drew a lot as a kid. I read a lot. My dad was a psychiatrist. So there was a lot of stuff from like a psychology standpoint that we would talk about, but he had this like weird kind of side hobby for like pop culture science. So things about, whether it was like quantum physics or engineering or evolutionary biology. So we would have a lot of talks about that. So I had a lot of books on all of that stuff that I dove into when I was pretty young. And I really liked those classes the most when I was in college. I was in college for like 10 years, and I don't even think I have an associate's to show for it because I kept bouncing around. But the hard science classes, I loved the absolute most. Those were the most useful. Those are the ones that I still lean on when it comes to critical thinking or analyzing things. Those are the standards that were set. But outright nerd stuff is comic book, superhero stuff. I've seen every Marvel movie except like the last 2 years worth. Once I realized how bad the Disney Plus shows were, I tapped out. And I had every Spawn comic ever made. Spawn was my shit when I was like 10 years old. Um, Looking back on it, the stories were horrible. The writing was horrible, but I love the artwork and how edgy it was. There's nothing like edgy 90s comic books. Everything was extreme, everything was extra, everything was over muscled. And I always say when I'm looking at things like body positivity, when I'm looking at this has been going on since I was a kid. I remember hearing about eating disorders because at the time everything was like heroin chic. So women were looking at like Kate Moss. Women were looking at these models that had no meat, no ass. They were all 98 pounds and probably had, early onset osteoporosis. And it was brutal. It was a brutal field to be in. And it was completely, it chewed people up because the expectations were there. The beauty standards didn't give. So you take young girls and expose them to all this stuff, and they're like, "Holy hell! Like, how do you meet this standard? If you're a girl and you're over 5'4", how do you meet that standard? If you do have hips, if you do have legs, and that, how do you meet that standard?" So you get that fixation on pop culture and at least eating disorders and self esteem stuff, and so on. And I would hear that, and they would, say like, "Oh, if you scale Barbie to life size, she'd be like 7.5 feet tall." And I hear that, and I'm like looking at all of my action figures, and I remember I had one of what Strong Guy. That was his name, Strong Guy, and his huge body, and his head was like that big. And you look at the proportions. You look at like a Rob Liefeld comic. You look at some of the ridiculous shit that was written, and it's like, is this the source of all of it? Is this like the insecurity and the body dysmorphia and we just never pinpointed it? We never thought about it. We just took it as normal, went about our lives, and became hobbyist lifters trying to chase these unattainable standards. I don't know. Anyways, that's my connection to my nerd history. Oh my god, there's so many guys. Marvel is failing. Don't get me started, man. I really wish I had more time to put into that other channel because I really would like to do like a pop culture movie review uh, lean, but I haven't figured out how to write a script in less than like 5 days. When I do, I think I'll put more time into that. But yeah, don't get me started. I don't even care about the woke stuff. Like I don't even care ideologically. Every good piece of art is going to have pieces of the person that made it in it. I don't care if it challenges what I think or if it has a different leaner perspective. Make it good. Just make it good. Don't use it as a human shield to insulate your product from criticism. Just make it good. Sheether, what's up, buddy? Man, I got inspiration from you. All those open office live streams you've been doing. I'm like, I got to step it up. I got to make myself more accessible. Dan Henderson, you skip my question. Why? Because there's 500 questions on here, and I can't get to them all. Kong is very fun and refreshing. Hugh, new member. Thanks, buddy. Here's a question I have for you guys. Any of you that are members, because I'm trying to balance my engagement with all of you guys. I'm going to do this a lot more often, but I'm trying to figure out how to make the most of the YouTube memberships. I have Patreon. I'm pretty active on there. I post weekly threads, Q and A's up there. I'll post training footage and what's going on, and I engage a bit more there. If any of you guys have ideas or things you've experienced on other channels that you're members of, if you have any ideas for that, help me out because I want to be able to give as much as I can. What's my next video going to be about? This is a one that I've been talking about. I've been writing for way too long. It's going to be kind of like the bench video that I did a couple months ago. It was the first long form video that was hyper edited that did very well, and that's what I'm trying to move my content to. I want it to be more like video essay type stuff. It's just so much more rigorous, and I do everything myself. All of my editing I do myself. All the writing, all the filming. It's exhausting in this weird kind of psychological way. I'm not used to giving this much creative effort. I can sit in front of a camera and talk for hours about this shit. Nobody's going to watch that. So I got to invest time into refining these other skills. So I'm going to do that for squatting. And then I have some ideas. I got to go back to some programming videos. I've been away from and I don't mean programming like program reviews, breaking down other popular programs. I mean giving like basic advice on how to run through training in a reliable, predictable way for the average trainee given X, Y, or Z. So I got to go back to that. So squatting, basically how to squat for no gains. That's the thing. Kong is very fun and refreshing. Thanks, buddy. That's kind of what it was meant to be, refreshing. It's, I mean, it is a hypertrophy program, but there's a reason it's just 4 weeks of no barbell stuff with a lot of high rep isolation stuff. It is to clear out when you get kind of burnt out from all the beat down. So especially going into a contest prep where it's just the beat down of barbell stuff, heavy over and over and over. If all you get is that 4 week little period to do some high rep stuff, remember what it's like to catch a pump, then you can carry that into the accessory work as you get some momentum there, as you start to reintroduce barbell stuff. It's not meant to be like, this is going to be the best program you've ever run that you should run for the rest of your life. I wrote it as a change up. Have I tried Chat GPT to support my training? No, I've seen people type some stuff in. I know you can ask it for training advice, whatever, not to support my training. I've dicked around with it for so many other things. I'm trying to use it to help me write content faster because the fact is AI can now write rough drafts better than I can. And it takes a fraction of the time. It's just so awesome what they've been able to do. And actually, I did an interview a couple of days ago, actually, with a guy who's a professor of computer science at UC Berkeley, and he's writing a book. And we did like an hour and a half long interview. One of his chapters, it's about just evaluating science, like how to apply it in these practical capacities, what the shortcomings are, and when science kind of becomes this thing that we put up on a pedestal and people are engaged in it for the sake of it, not for the sake of truth, whatever. We had and I'm going to pull some pieces of that and put it up. But he's a computer science major. We actually computer science professor. We actually went into the weeds with AI stuff for a little bit. Super fascinating. But I'm trying to use that a little bit better, I'm trying to use that a little bit more to make my content production a little bit faster. Get the rough draft out, streamline all this shit, and then I can come in and punch it up instead of burning myself out trying to string together coherent sentences when I'm under caffeinated. Hugh, just happy to support you on YouTube. Man, that's the spirit. You guys are something else. Psychological aspect of missing a lot of time and making a comeback for rotator cuff surgery. I could write 5 books on that. Best thing I ever learned, 100% best thing I ever learned is that it doesn't matter how much time you take off, doesn't matter how much progress you lose. First time I figured out that you don't just keep the strength you got, I was like mortified. And then it's like, I gotta white knuckle it. I gotta keep my gains. No, you can take a ton of time off. You can lose 50% of your strength. I broke my ankle, broke my foot completely off of the bone, have a plate and 12 screws in my leg. And that is the story behind why I wear Oli lifters now, where I didn't for 10 years before that. But I couldn't squat 135 when I came back. And I got such debilitating pain from doing it on the way back. I thought I'd never lift again. It took about 4 months of training before I hit an all-time PR after that. And I use that now. I actually use that to clear out when things hurt, when psychologically I'm burnt out in between contests. I know what my time to get back to normal is, 6 or 8 weeks to get back to normal. Another 6 or 8 weeks of hard ass training to get in PR territory. Do not kill yourself trying to hold on to all your gains. Take time off when you need it. Comebacks are fast as long as you do them right. Just know that when you come back, you're not going to be lifting heavy. That's fine. Come back, start at 50% of what you're able to do. Go on a linear progression. Even for more advanced lifters, LPs are extremely useful for comebacks. They're not sustainable once you get back into the weeds, but they're extremely useful. So take your time. Let your body tell you when you're good to come back. SEK. All right. I don't know what SEK is. I don't know if that's a lot or a little, but thank you either way, brother. Sheether, the longer I've spent in strongman, the more I've come to agree with your belief that push press should be the base lift of strongman. You get selecting the most challenging option possible as your base lift. That way the show you sign up for will be equal in difficulty or easier to gain good momentum. That being said, scaling that to using strict base overhead movement seems just lead to people being drastically underskilled at dip and drive mechanics and probably over rewards a layback pattern if heavier strict presses is the feedback loop as improving as an overhead athlete. Yeah, and I've always prioritized it as the thing that carries over to the most things as well. So the common theme is that people jump into a jerk because especially when you're newer, when you're less developed, a push jerk, the gap between what you can do in a push press and a jerk for a lot of like beginning athletes, this is true for a lot of women as well. You usually have a bigger disparity between their lower and upper body strength at the start, at least. They can just do so much more in a jerk in a shorter period of time. And then they're like, well, that's what I got to do. And then you get some people who become very good at the jerk who have these deficiencies in their press. And I know a lot of people who played into that to the point where if they have a barbell or even a log on relatively flat ground, they can do all right. But once you get into like circus dumbbell territory, odd objects, bag presses, block presses, so on, they lose the ability to fall back on that and it becomes a problem. Push press just carries over to everything. I got really good at push jerking. I was 20 or 21 and I did a push jerk out of a rack with 365 for a double. And that was long before PEDs. And that's when I first thought like, oh, I can get good at this. Now that was my pet lift. I have short arms, my little dachshund limbs, bar barely clears over my head. I had some advantages that reinforced my my success there. But that's when I was like, oh, I could potentially be very good at this. A couple years later, I made a conscious decision to never push jerk again and to just push press because I kept getting my ass kicked in log presses. I kept losing my balance when I was looking at high ceilings or blue sky when I was log pressing outside. I kept missing the lockout on odd presses, and it was pissing me off. And it took a couple years before I push pressed 365. But by the time I got to that point, I actually couldn't push jerk 365 anymore. Just the skill decayed. Potential is up, but my actual skill just dropped. But it didn't matter because I was infinitely better at overhead pressing than anything else. So yeah, that skill reinforcement is very, very big. But also you still get the lockout. You still get enough mechanical tension on the upper body that a push press can still develop the shoulders and triceps in a very useful way. How often do I take Q&As on Patreon? I just started doing weekly. So every Friday or Saturday, I post a weekly thread. I leave it up to people to put videos if they want form checks. Some guys, and I try to answer everything. Some guys will come in with 3 posts worth of their weekly thoughts. But I try to give everybody a touch. I try to give something meaningful to everybody. So if you're on my Patreon, I really try to do the best service I can there. What degree of backgrounding is acceptable while deadlifting? Oh my God, you guys are trying to start a war here. It varies from person to person because there's the answer I can give to the population at large of if I was coaching a bunch of people, what I would allow for. But then there's individuals. I know some outliers. I know some freaks. Andrew Mock is a great example. Buddy of mine, he's 6'3" and he competes as a 231 strongman. Very lanky. Also has no body fat on him. Loves to take his shirt off. Andrew has steel cable erectors. He has the ugliest deadlift form I've ever seen in my life. Has never had a back injury. And when I tried to take him out of that setup, he went so far back that it became obvious that that extra ground to make up wasn't worth it. It would take too long. So it didn't seem to be a problem. So he actually, I mean, imagine how you would set up if you were at the bottom of a stiff leg deadlift and you were trying to stretch your hamstrings as much as you could before pulling. That's how he pulls. And he does so with his back in a complete round. Consequently, fantastic stone loader, great at mass wrestling. Anything where his back has to be rounded, he's really good. However, he's an outlier. I guarantee if you had 100 young kids train like that, a big chunk of them would have issues moving forward. A lot of them might get really strong rectors, but a big chunk of them would have problems. So while there is play in the joints, there is individuality that's going to change from person to person. I still believe there's also a standard. There's no other sport or discipline in the world where you just leave it up to what feels good to the athlete. There has to be a standard. There's no successful coaching organization that has put out a lot of good lifters that would just say, however you get it up is fine. So you can round as long as I would say the upper back is fine. If you're rounding in your lumbar spine, I would look into that. I think eventually that can potentially become a problem, more for some people than others, maybe, but still not a great thing to do. And I would also say that the efficiency of the deadlift is also more important. That's why I harp on the technique. Even if you can get away with it, it is a less efficient way to pull, period, full stop. The more rigid your midsection is, the more when you pull up through your hamstrings and your glutes, the more the spine maintains posture, the more efficient you're going to be on your pull, period. If you're like a sponge, if you're like just a wet noodle and you just give like a telephone pole in a hurricane, like you don't want that. That's not efficient. You wouldn't allow that in any other lift or in any other sport. Why would you allow it with deadlifts? It's just because it's a way to not scare people off of deadlifting. I find that ridiculous. Direct ab oblique lower back training for hypertrophy and strength with the hope to carry over to compound lifts. It's only going to really carry over if you're weak. So if you have a big problem with your midsection, which I did for a long time, that's why I got injured in my low back so many times. I had a dozen injuries over 10 years. Each one put me out for 6 weeks or longer. Made it hard to put my socks on, made life miserable. It wasn't until I figured out how to brace and how to get tight through my midsection that I could actually get any ground on my deadlift without getting sidelined. Part of that was direct ab work. Part of it was also bracing. So you see Ed Cohen doing like barbell holds, like suitcase holds with a barbell. Like that's a good one. I think isometrics, heavy offloaded stuff. Stuff like anti-rotation movements are great. Doesn't necessarily have to be like sit-ups or anything. Although anything that gets your abs stronger is going to help with that. Now, if you don't have a direct weakness, I wouldn't expect to notice direct carryover. I don't think it works that way. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Those letters don't go together. Blanchukes. I don't know. Thank you for your donation, brother. What is your opinion on overhead press to improve my bench? Does it seem to help my bench? Bench 362, overhead press is 220. God, I'm trying to do the math off the top of my head. First of all, overhead press meaning strict or push press. That makes a big difference. If you can only push press 220 and you get a 362 bench, that is a pretty big disparity there. Pretty big disparity. What is it? Alex Leonidas, I think, had a 400 bench. I think his best strict press was about 220, 225, I think. There's probably room to build up your overhead press a little bit, but it's not always going to be one-to-one. Depends where your weakness is. Depends how you bench press. Depends what your leverages are. A lot of things go into it. So in general, strongmen know in general that benching usually doesn't correlate to overhead pressing unless you had like really shit triceps or something and you did like a bunch of floor pressing and that fixed that weakness. But in general, you can go bench, get a bench PR. Your overhead isn't going to do much. However, a lot of benchers find that when they focus on overhead pressing and that goes up, that the front delt getting stronger actually helps with that. The question is how you balance it. If you're on a barbell specific program, that's most of your work, then yeah, dedicate some time to overhead pressing. It doesn't have to be the same split. It can be lighter. You can use variations. You could use behind the neck. You can use wider grip. You can use different bars. There's a bunch of different things you can do if you're using compound movement specifically in your training to make it sustainable. It's not necessarily like you have to, well, I bench exactly the way that I overhead press. You can give one priority. For strict stuff, sorry, not for strict stuff, for accessory stuff, if you do a wide variety of accessory work, then it's super easy to get it in. You can specialize on benching and you can do things like front raise. I love front raises. Front raises are great. You do lateral raises. You can do dips. There's a bunch of exercises you can do. As long as the shoulders are getting hit, that's the important thing. Dude, take some inventory. You know, if you have a 362 bench, can you do strict front raises with 50-pound dumbbells? If you can't, shoulders probably got to get a little bit stronger. So something to keep in mind. Um, Oh yeah, and Sheether answered this too. I remember that when you had your open office, I asked this question. If you bench with a narrower grip with a greater amount of horizontal bar travel, you might see a greater amount of carryover from overhead work. So that's like where an overhead is like, if I can turn to the side here, um, like a front raise. And I've seen this demonstrated by some big benchers. I've heard Kaz Meyer talk about this. Leroy Walker talked about this, where when you hit low, and you come back when you do that curve back over your face, that is a bunch of front delt right there. So when you get that action, that extra strength gives you better control as you bench to get that sucker back over your face. Um, so you are likely to lose strength on barbell exercises on the Kong program. Um, if you're the person that is focusing on your max strength at every week, yes, but that's not how you should approach programming on something that features distinct mesocycles, because that's a main feature of periodization. In a year-long plan, there will be times in your training where your max strength is not at an all-time high. That's what peaking is. You have to be fatigued enough to grow. Fatigue masks fitness. If you're training hard enough to grow, you're not going to be fresh enough to be peaked. That dynamic exists. Also, when you're training on different things, prioritizing different things, you will not always be. Anybody who says they're peaking all the time is full of shit. That means they don't know what peaking means. In the hardest training you're doing, or the one that you might need the most because it's shoring up the biggest weaknesses you have to widen that base out so you can actually have a higher strength potential. When you're doing that, your max strength probably going to be down a little bit. It comes back quick. That's why we do these block type approaches to build qualities over here and pay it forward down the line. 4 weeks is not enough to seriously detrain your lifts, especially in the face of regular activity. So, my camera is overheating, guys. So I think I got a couple minutes left here. Thanks so much for stopping in. I'm going to see if I got let's get one more good one. Let's leave on a good note. Saw Paul Mauser was in here earlier when I had my botched. If you're still here, what's up, Paul? Sorry, I had technical difficulties. I wanted to know exactly what you meant when you said, what the hell? More plates on man. For a second, I thought I had a heavy hitter in here. More plates, no dates. That's a good one. That's true. More plates, no dates. That's absolutely true. If you're skilled at dating, it doesn't matter how big or how strong you are. All that time in the gym is time not spent talking to females. Or if you're a female, it's different for females. I'm not getting into that. But yeah, it's a good way to dig into being an antisocial goober. And that's exactly what I did. And that's why I'm here right now. Is incline barbell press truly the sweet spot in the middle of bench and overhead? I would actually say no, or at least not for everybody. I know some people that had a ton of success with incline. They really like it for an accessory to overhead. I almost see it as like the worst of both worlds. That's just me, though. That's not a very good answer. I know. Leroy Walker's a good example. He trained in my gym in Redlands for a couple months. He's a big gym hopper. He's in Austin now, actually, shockingly enough. He was trying to get his social media going, so he was like touring around all the gyms. But I got a couple bench workouts with him, and this guy was like a 675 bencher, and incline benching was like his number one thing. He loved it. And it would piss off all the other powerlifters because they're like, dude, do an actual specific prep. Stop incline benching. You might hit that 700 bench. I watched this guy in a meet get 700, no shirt, basically a flat back, pretty narrow grip, 3/4 of the way to lockout. It was impressive. And he swore by incline pressing. That seems like a very individual thing. That doesn't seem like something that would necessarily carry over. But then again, if you love incline benching and you get it really, really good, overall your benching is going to go up. It's just a matter of where you switch gears to be really, really specific. So we're always going back and forth between general or specific. Um, Advice for extra exercise for beginner programs like Grayskull. No, those are hard to screw up. Their recommendations are good. I don't know why you would want to tweak them. They're supposed to be simple programs. Don't overthink it. Based. Oh man. I've been watching a lot of streaming lately. That was also part of the inspiration for this. I was just the guy 10 years ago that couldn't understand why kids were watching videos of people playing video games instead of playing the video games. In fact, why the fuck weren't they just playing outside? Now we don't have cable, but we have a YouTube app on our TV. So I watch an insane amount of YouTube. We started watching streaming. So I'm clocking the steady decline of my psychology and my social skills as time goes on. I also find myself using the lingo that would have angered me not that long ago, and now it's like, well, it just makes sense. When I saw somebody say "based" in response to something I said, that genuinely made me happy. This is where I'm at in my life. When Leroy was working with Josh Bryan, it seemed that a big part of the reason he inclined was from low back's pain on flat bench. Josh had to have him doing feet elevated work mostly. Huh. That's interesting. And he would do a lot of feet elevated work. He absolutely would do that. Yeah, he's a guy. His hips were so goddamn tight. He had a hard time getting his feet down to the ground. Um, and because of that, and because he has such a non-specific style, he had the weird thumbs out thing, and he grip real close together. And he would take it straight down with like his elbows flared out, flat back, no mobility. It's like the anti-powerlifting setup, and he just got strong as shit. Um, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if that's how it started, and he just got really strong that way, it's like, oh well, now I can bench more. Yeah, more trend, more men. That's going on a t-shirt. Jesus Christ, keep them coming, guys. I need to up my merch game. My merch game. Um, T-shirt I'm wearing right now. Oh shit, I'm supposed to be wearing my Barbell Apparel stuff. Don't tell them. Don't tell. This Black Rifle Coffee. When we moved to Texas, I had exactly 5 contest shirts, and that was it. So I had to throw all of them out because we moved in my truck, and that's all we took when we drove from California. So one of the first places I bought clothes was at the Black Rifle Coffee in San Antonio, and I went in and bought like 9 shirts, and this was one of them. So I know people. I can't wear this shit online without people giving some Black Rifle commentary. It's either people that see them as being like uber conservative nut jobs because it's all like military and guns, whatever, or the conservative people that think they're like actually liberal cucks because some of the other stuff they said. I don't care, guys. I don't. I don't wear clothing as a reflection of political ideology. Their coffee tastes good, and they were close, and I needed a T-shirt. Agree with Pete Rubish's suggestion to do weighted back extensions. Absolutely, absolutely, it's a great exercise, and it's the one thing I program that nobody ever does. Super great way to hit your posterior chain in a way that doesn't blow out your recovery. It's like the way I recommend RDLs. It's like a bodybuilding version of a deadlift. Doesn't fuck with your CNS the same way, but it builds those muscles. Back extension is that times 10. You just have to do more reps to make it effective just because of the nature of the movement. People hate doing reps because it's uncomfortable. If you can commit to doing 8 to 15 reps with heavy ass weight for really, really hard work and progress that the way you progress everything else, your posterior is just going to be on another level. 45 or horizontal, doesn't matter. Pick one, doesn't matter. Don't sweat the details. Pick one and get good at it. You don't have to do every exercise under the sun. Yeah, Sheether knows, bro. Sheether knows. Sheether, what's up with you, man? How are you doing today? What do you got on the what do you got coming up? You got a meet coming up? Any more strongman stuff? I'm fizzling. I'm literally waiting for my camera to die right now. It's overheating. So if the circuitry doesn't cook, we'll keep this going as long as we can. Lower reps, 4 to 6 on RDL, good. Absolutely, but not all the time. People avoid 10s and 12s because they hate them. Fantastic for hypertrophy. Most people need bigger hams, bigger ass, bigger erectors. uh, 10s and 12s on RDLs at some point. If you want to go heavy, do your fives, do a back off set, AMRAP, 10 to 12, something hard, something with weight. Don't be this 500-pound deadlifter that does RDLs with 135. Get some weight. Get some weight on there. I have to send my clients videos of some of my former female lifters who are doing RDLs with like 275 to shame them. Or God help me, I'll put glute bridges. I'll be like, I did glute bridges with 225. It's like, you got girls using 405, 120-pound non-competitive like physique girls. So it's like, have some pride, guys. Either do these exercises or don't. If you hate them and you're like, it's hard, I don't want to do it, don't do it. But this stuff is magic as long as you treat it well. All of my stuff about recovery and programming is based around the fact that the big lifts are hard to recover from. When you stumble across an exercise that builds you well and is easy to recover from, spam that shit as much as you can. Spam it over and over and over, because there's no wrong. Shut up, Cash. I'll get you over there. There's no wrong answers with those exercises. That's why bodybuilders can train recklessly. They don't need programs. The nature of the exercise doesn't require you to walk a tightrope. Trying to get clearances, no equipment, high bar pause is my current training objective. Then you're going to pick a show. I'm out of the loop. Clarence Kennedy, no equipment, high bar pause. So what number is that? You're just trying to beat his number, or you're just trying to set a new number altogether? Trying to set the bar up. No top 10 Christmas movies, because I'm a lazy piece of shit, because I'm trying to focus on this channel and I keep finding distractions. I'm like, I'm going to start another channel. I'm going to do a course. I'm going to write another book. I'm going to do 10 different things. This year is going to be about this channel. The movie stuff kills me, because that's what most of my shower rants are above. Because I'm a nerd. I'm a comic book fan. I'm a pop culture fan, but I'm also a huge movie fan. So when those two things conflict, I just go off. Top 10 Christmas movies. I'm going to get into that. The Family Man, Nick Cage, is probably number one. That movie turns me into a sentimental bitch. I make Laura watch that every year. I also like Just Friends with Ryan Reynolds, and Amy Smart. Amy Smart, whatever happened to her? Vacation movies are also up there. If you're not subscribed to Sheether, what are you even doing? I know, totally. By the way, I told Dave to check you out, because Dave loves talking, nerding out about stuff. And when I thought about somebody, like, I need to be sold, because I'm not jacked. I'm not that strong, especially right now. I'm not that accomplished. So it's like a bigger barrier. And I'm like, who's really fucking strong that can talk to Dave Tate for 4 hours straight and like just enlighten everybody in the room? That's Sam, bro. So all of you, if you're a fan of Sam, go message Dave and tell him he needs to get Sam on the show. Increasing weight on RDL makes you feel your lower back more than your hamstrings. One of the reasons you need to do it, not necessarily increase weight. It's just as good of a bracing exercise as it is a hamstring developer. So use it as a bracing exercise. And if that's where you're struggling, keep the weight below that point. Focus on, imagine that at any given time, some YouTube prankster is going to come soccer kick you in the ribs while you're doing it. Make your face turn red, start sweating, get veins popping out of your skull when you do it. Make the lighter weight work for you if you have to. But have that be the limiting factor when you're selecting weight. Do I feel it in my back, or am I braced? Am I rock fucking solid? It's not sexy, but it works better than anything you can do. 675 high bar pause. All right. Oh, you got that in you. I saw your front. I feel like you could front squat that in the near future. Recommendations for getting better at strongman conditioning. Do strongman events. That's really it. I mean, you can do intervals. I think that's as complex as you should get, like EMOMs. You can do that with just about any strongman thing. So that's pretty easy. Just simple interval stuff, or just do runs. Don't shy away from medleys. Don't shy away from tire flips. Don't shy away from high rep stone loading or keg loading. Practice, ground to shoulder. As long as you're regularly doing the movements, your conditioning will be great. Yeah, and don't overthink the strongman movements. You just got to put them in. And look, there's a reason that when you saw like the West Side guys doing GPP, you saw them doing drags and Husafel carries. It's fantastic conditioning work. It builds your capacity up. It has a lot of value regardless of whether or not you compete. And take it seriously. You have to take it seriously. Don't just go from a implement to implement, like just getting your toe in the water. You know, it's an implement. It's meant to be strenuous. And again, it's another thing. You can strain yourself on those movements because they're so varied and different. You're inefficient at them. It's hard to burn yourself out on most strongman stuff until you really get a lot more advanced. All right, my voice is getting hoarse. I'm at an hour. Good. That's what I wanted to do. I'm like, can I talk for an hour straight? You all know I can talk for an hour straight. Thanks, guys, for stopping by. Today's Saturday. I'm probably going to experiment and see what days this works best for. I don't know if a weekend or like a Wednesday or a Thursday would be better. I'll experiment. I'm going to try and make this a weekly thing. Um, if you guys haven't, if you want to get a hold of me, if there's a question you asked here I didn't get to, Patreon is the easiest way to get to me. Or actually the YouTube memberships. Thank you to the people that signed up today to support. That's huge. And I say it routinely. I know it gets old, but sincerely, like that type of support, it's the only reason I was able to do this full time. It's the only reason my content production's gotten better. It's the only reason that I've been able to put out content more frequently, because trying to do this, well, like working at a restaurant, that shit was going nowhere fast. So seriously, I appreciate all of that. Take care, guys. Till next time. This is Bromley. We'll see you.